Hey everyone, tonight we're slipping back into the shadows of time, stepping into a world so raw and unforgiving, it makes our modern struggles feel like a walk in the park. Picture this: you are crouched in a damp cave, the air thick with the scent of wet earth and smoldering pine. Outside, a bone chilling wind howls across a tundra that stretches forever, dotted with hulking beasts that could crush you with a single swipe. This was the Neanderthals' reality, a life where every sunrise demanded you fight for your next breath. Honestly, if you were dropped into their world, you probably wouldn't last a week. Harsh, I know. But that's the truth of it. So before you get cozy under those blankets, take a second to like this video and subscribe, but only if you're really into what I'm doing here. I'd love to know where you're tuning in from, maybe a city apartment or a quiet countryside bedroom. Drop your location and local time in the comments. It's wild to think we're all connected under the same starry sky. Now turn off the lights, maybe switch on a fan for that soft hum, and let's dive into tonight's journey together. We're stepping into Ice Age Europe roughly 100,000 years ago, where Neanderthals roamed a landscape that was equal parts breathtaking and brutal. Imagine a world locked in the grip of towering glaciers, where summers were fleeting and winters stretched on like an eternal punishment. The ground crunched underfoot, a mix of frost and brittle grass, while the sky hung heavy with clouds that promised snow. Neanderthals weren't the grunting, club-wielding stereotypes you might picture from old cartoons. These were sharp, adaptable people, built like tanks to withstand the cold, stocky, muscular, with broad noses to warm the frigid air before it hit their lungs. Their lives were a daily gauntlet of survival, where every decision could mean the difference between another day and a frozen grave. Let's set the scene properly. Europe back then was a patchwork of tundra and sparse forests, with ice sheets creeping down from the Arctic, swallowing entire regions. The air was so cold it could burn your skin in minutes, and the wind carried a bite that cut through even the thickest animal hides. Neanderthals lived in small bands, maybe 10 to 30 souls, always on the move chasing scarce resources. No grocery stores, no hospitals, no laws to keep things fair. Just you, your kin, and a world that didn't care if you lived or died. They faced predators that make modern lions look like house cats, cave bears that stood 12 feet tall, saber-toothed cats with fangs like daggers, and wolves that hunted in packs smarter than your average street gang. And here's the kicker: Neanderthals didn't just survive this. They thrived for over 300,000 years. That's longer than we've had Wi-Fi, folks, so let's give them some credit. Their day started early, probably before dawn, with the group huddled around a fire they'd fought to keep alive through the night. Imagine the smell of smoke mixing with the musky scent of mammoth hides draped over shoulders. Someone's flint napping a spear point, the sharp clink echoing off cave walls, while another tends to a scraped hide, turning it into something wearable. Food was never guaranteed. A good day meant a successful hunt, maybe a reindeer, or, if they were lucky, a woolly mammoth that could feed the group for weeks. A bad day, well, you might be chewing on roots, or worse, nothing at all. Starvation was a constant shadow creeping closer with every failed hunt. And here's a little wisdom from the ages: survival wasn't just about strength. It was about cunning teamwork and knowing when to run. Neanderthals learned that early, or they didn't make it past childhood. Hunting was the heartbeat of their existence, but it was no walk in the park. Picture a group of Neanderthals wrapped in furs, stalking a herd of woolly rhinoceroses across a windswept plain. These beasts were tanks, 6 tons of muscle horn and bad attitude. The hunters had to get close, real close, to drive a spear into its flank. One wrong move, and you're a smear on the tundra. Their spears were works of art, though wooden shafts hardened in fire, tipped with stone points so sharp they could pierce thick hide. Creating those points was no joke. It took hours of patient work chipping away at flint until it was just right. If you think your job's stressful, try knowing a dull spear point could mean your family goes hungry. Talk about pressure. Here's a quirky tidbit for you. Neanderthals might have been the first to invent glue. They used birch bark tar to stick stone points to their spears, a process so complex it's like they were running a prehistoric chemistry lab. You have to heat the bark just right without oxygen, or it's a sticky mess. Imagine the first guy who figured that out probably burned his fingers and cursed in whatever proto-language they used. Bet his buddies called him the tar guy for years. But that ingenuity was key. Every tool, every fire, every stitch of clothing was a hard-won victory against a world that wanted them dead. Now let's talk about their social lives, because even in this brutal world, Neanderthals weren't lone wolves. They lived in tight-knit groups, probably extended families where everyone had a role. The elders passed down knowledge: where to find the best flint, how to track a herd through snow. Kids learned fast or didn't make it. Women, just as tough as the men, gathered plants, prepared hides, and kept the group alive through sheer grit. But life wasn't all warm fuzzies. Competition for resources could turn ugly. Imagine two brothers fighting over the last strip of mammoth meat, fists flying, grunts echoing. No HR department to mediate, just survival of the toughest. And yet they cared for each other in ways that'll tug at your heart, but we'll get to that in a bit. There's some debate among eggheads about how smart Neanderthals really were. Some say they were just shy of modern humans with brains big enough to dream up complex plans. Others argue they were limited, stuck in a rut with their tools and traditions. The truth: their bones and artifacts scream intelligence burials, with flowers, jewelry from shells, caves painted with ochre. They weren't writing novels, but they were problem solvers, artists, and survivors. If they were dumb, we wouldn't be talking about them 40,000 years later. So maybe cut them some slack, right? Here's a light chuckle for you. Ever wonder what a Neanderthal date night looked like? Probably sharing a roasted hare by the fire, flirting with a well-crafted spear point. Hey, check out my flintwork, babe. Romantic in a prehistoric way. But seriously, their bonds were forged in necessity. You didn't survive alone, and loyalty was everything. Betray the group, and you're out in the cold, literally. As the firelight flickered in their caves, Neanderthals faced a world where every day tested their limits. Hunger gnawed at their bellies, predators lurked in the shadows, and the cold was a relentless enemy. Yet they kept going, driven by something deeper than instinct, a spark of humanity that refused to be snuffed out. They weren't just surviving, they were building a legacy, one that's etched into our very DNA. So, as we drift deeper into their story, let's hold on to that image: a small band of Neanderthals huddled together, their breath visible in the icy air, fighting for one more day under a sky that offered no mercy. The sun's barely up, painting the tundra in a pale, icy glow. And already the Neanderthals are on the move, their breath steaming in the frigid air. Hunting wasn't just a task for them, it was the pulse of their survival, a high-stakes dance with death that played out on a stage of frost and fang. Every step across the brittle grass could lead to a feast or a funeral. Picture yourself in their furs, clutching a spear, your heart pounding as you track a beast that could crush you without a second thought. This was their reality, a world where food didn't come from a store, but from outsmarting creatures built like tanks. Let's dive into the brutal, breathtaking world of the Neanderthal hunt, where courage, cunning, and a bit of luck were the only things keeping starvation at bay. Imagine a group of 10, maybe 12 Neanderthals moving silently across a windswept plain. The air smells of damp earth and pine with a faint tang of musk from the herd they're trailing. Woolly mammoths. Their primary target were no small fry, 11 feet tall, 6 tons of muscle with tusks that could skewer you like a kebab. These weren't the kind of animals you just strolled up to and poked. The hunters had to be precise, working as a unit, their eyes locked on every twitch of the herd. One wrong move and you're not just losing dinner, you're losing a brother, a sister, or your own life. Their spears, crafted with obsessive care, were their lifeline. Wooden shafts, fire-hardened to a tough sheen tipped with flint points so sharp they could slice through hide like butter. Making those points was an art form, hours of chipping away at stone, each flake a tiny victory. If you think your Monday meeting is high pressure, try knowing a chipped spear point could mean your kids go hungry. The hunt itself was a masterclass in strategy born from generations of trial and error. Neanderthals didn't have rifles or traps. They had brains and teamwork. One of their go-to moves was the cliff drive, herding a group of animals toward a drop-off, hoping to send them plummeting to their deaths. Sounds simple, right? Except you're running alongside a stampeding herd of mammoths, close enough to feel their heat, praying you don't trip and get trampled into the permafrost. Archaeological sites across Europe, like La Côte de Saint-Brelade in Jersey, show piles of bones at the base of cliffs, hundreds of mammoths, and rhinos, proof of these deadly gambits. But it wasn't all Hollywood heroics. A single misstep and the hunters could end up crushed under a ton of panicked beast. Here's a bit of ancient wisdom survival demanded, knowing when to strike and when to flee. Hesitate and your lunch. Overcommit and your lunch. Balance was everything. Another tactic was the ambush, where patience was as crucial as courage. Picture a small group crouched in a thicket near a watering hole, their bodies smeared with mud to mask their scent. They'd wait sometimes for days, muscles cramped, stomachs growling, until a lone reindeer or horse wandered close. Then in a heartbeat, they'd explode into action, thrusting spears with every ounce of strength. The Levallois points they used, named after a site in France where archaeologists first found them, were razor sharp, designed to pierce deep and bring down prey fast. But even a perfect strike didn't guarantee success. A wounded mammoth could turn and charge its tusks, swinging like wrecking balls. Cave bears 10 feet tall and meaner than a cornered wolverine were even worse. One swipe could break your spine. And here's a chuckle for you. Imagine a Neanderthal hunter covered in mud, whispering to his buddy, "If this bear kills me, don't tell my wife I tripped." Gotta keep some dignity even in the Ice Age. Processing a kill was its own brutal ordeal. Once the beast was down, the real work began. Picture the scene: the group swarms the carcass, stone knives flashing as they carve through thick hide. Blood stains the snow, the air thick with the coppery scent. Every part of the animal was used: meat for food, bones for tools, hides for clothing, sinews for binding. Waste wasn't an option when survival hung by a thread. Butchering a mammoth could take days, and the group had to work fast before scavengers like hyenas or wolves showed up. Those predators weren't just competition, they were a threat. A pack of hyenas with jaws strong enough to crack bone could drive a whole band off their hard-won kill. And if the hunt failed, starvation wasn't a distant threat, it was a wolf at the door ready to pounce. Here's a quirky fact to chew on: Neanderthals might have been the first to practice paleo dining. They didn't just eat meat. They cracked open bones to get at the marrow, a calorie bomb that could keep them going through lean times. Think of it as their version of an energy bar, except it took a rock and some elbow grease to access. Their diet wasn't all steak and bones, though. They scavenged plants, roots, and berries when they could find them, but in the Ice Age, green stuff was scarce. Some sites show traces of pine nuts and mushrooms in their teeth, proof they weren't picky eaters. If it kept you alive, it was on the menu. The physical toll of hunting was relentless. Neanderthal skeletons are like a roadmap of pain-broken ribs, fractured skulls, arms snapped and healed crooked. One skeleton from Shanidar Cave in Iraq shows a guy who took a spear to the chest and still lived for years, probably limping and wincing the whole time. These injuries weren't just badges of courage. They were a reminder of how close death always was. Yet their communities didn't abandon the wounded. Evidence suggests they cared for injured hunters, sharing food and shelter, even when it strained their resources. That's the kind of loyalty that makes you wonder if we modern folks could match it. If your buddy broke his leg on a hunt, would you carry him through a blizzard Neanderthals did? There's some academic squabbling about how effective Neanderthal hunting really was. Some scholars argue they were master strategists, coordinating complex hunts that rivaled modern teamwork. Others say they were reckless, taking crazy risks, because their tools were limited. The truth lies in the bones, both theirs and their prey's. Sites like Spy Cave in Belgium show heaps of butchered horse and reindeer bones, proof they weren't just stumbling into kills. They planned, they adapted, they survived. Maybe they weren't drawing up battle plans on a whiteboard, but they knew their stuff. Here's another laugh to lighten the mood. Ever think about a Neanderthal team building exercise? Picture them trying to herd a mammoth, one guy yelling, "No, left, left," while another trips over a rock. Bet they had some choice words for each other, even if we'll never know the language. But that teamwork was their secret weapon. No one hunted alone, not when you're facing a woolly rhino that could bench press a boulder. They relied on each other, communicating with gestures, grunts, maybe even a proto-language we can only guess at. Their hyoid bones, the bit in your throat that helps you talk, look a lot like ours. So they might have been chatting about more than just the weather. Failure wasn't just a bad day. It was a death sentence. A string of failed hunts could starve a whole group, especially in winter when plants were buried under snow. During lean times, they turned to desperate measures, scavenging, carrion digging for roots, even eating insects. Some sites show cut marks on Neanderthal bones, hinting at cannibalism when things got really bad. Not ritualistic, mind you, just survival. Imagine the gut-wrenching choice: eat your fallen kin or watch your kids starve. That's the kind of moral gray zone they lived in. And here's one more chuckle: if a Neanderthal ever tried to go vegan, they'd probably last about 3 days before eyeing their cousin's leg. Ice Age. Europe wasn't exactly a salad bar. As the firelight danced on the cave walls, the hunters would return, some triumphant, dragging a kill. Others empty-handed, their faces grim. The group would gather, sharing what little they had, knowing tomorrow meant another hunt, another roll of the dice. Their lives were a testament to grit, to the stubborn refusal to give up even when the odds were stacked against them. They weren't just chasing food. They were chasing survival itself, carving out a place in a world that didn't care if they made it. As we move deeper into their story, keep that image in your mind: a band of Neanderthals silhouetted against the setting sun, their spears ready, their eyes sharp, ready to face whatever the Ice Age threw at them next. The wind howls outside, clawing at the cave's mouth like a predator denied its prey, while inside a small fire crackles, casting flickering shadows on the rough stone walls. The Neanderthals huddle close, their breath visible in the chill, sharing warmth and stories in a world that offered neither freely. This wasn't just a group of survivors, it was a family bound by blood and necessity, their lives woven together in a tapestry of loyalty and loss. Tonight, we're diving into the heart of Neanderthal social structures, the bonds that held them together against the relentless grind of Ice Age life. These weren't just people scraping by, they were communities with all the love, tension, and sacrifice that come with it. Picture yourself among them, feeling the weight of every choice, knowing your survival depends on the person next to you for better or worse. Neanderthal groups were small, usually 15 to 20 souls, often extended families moving across the frozen landscape like nomads chasing a fleeting dream of plenty. Imagine a grandmother, her fingers gnarled from years of scraping hides, teaching a wide-eyed child which berries won't kill you. A father scarred from a mammoth hunt gone wrong, showing his son how to chip flint into a blade. A mother exhausted from nursing, still hauling wood to keep the fire alive. These weren't the idealized families of a sitcom. They were raw, real, and stretched to the breaking point by a world that didn't care. Every member had a role: hunter-gatherer, toolmaker, firekeeper, and slacking wasn't an option. If you didn't pull your weight, the whole group suffered. But here's the thing, they didn't just survive together. They cared for each other in ways that'd make you rethink what primitive means. Let's paint a scene. Dawn breaks over a frost-covered valley, the air sharp with the scent of pine and distant snow. The group's awake, moving with purpose. One guy's sharpening a spear, the clink of stone on stone, a steady rhythm. A woman's pounding roots into something edible, her hands stained with earth. Kids barely old enough to walk straight mimic the adults practicing with tiny flint scraps. Life was a team sport and everyone played, from the grizzled elders to the smallest kid. But it wasn't all harmony. Resources were scarce and tempers flared. Picture two brothers both hungry, eyeing the last chunk of reindeer meat. Words turned to shoves, shoves to fists. No one's calling a timeout, this is survival. And sometimes it got ugly. Here's a bit of old wisdom. In a world of scarcity, trust is your greatest asset, but it's also the first thing to crack under pressure. Their compassion, though, is what sets them apart. Archaeological sites like Shanidar Cave in Iraq tell stories that hit you right in the chest. There's this one skeleton, a man they call Shanidar I, who was a walking testament to care. Blind in one eye, arm withered, skull cracked from an old injury, he should have been left behind in a world where weakness was a death sentence. But he wasn't. He lived into his 40s, a ripe old age for a Neanderthal, because his people fed him, protected him, carried him through blizzards. Imagine the effort sharing your meager portion of meat, when your own stomach's growling, hauling an injured man across a frozen plain when you're barely standing yourself. That's not just kindness, that's defiance against a world that demanded selfishness. Here's a quirky tidbit: Neanderthals might have been the first to practice group therapy in a way. They buried their dead with care, sometimes with tools or flowers, suggesting they grieved together, maybe sharing stories around the fire to process their loss. At La Pharisee in France, a child's grave was lined with stones, the tiny body curled as if sleeping. Parents took time, precious time, to make that burial special, even when every hour was a fight for survival. That's love, raw and unfiltered, in a world that offered none of the comforts we take for granted. Bet they didn't have a word for closure, but they felt it deep in their bones. Life wasn't kind to the young either. Kids grew up fast by 6 or 7. They were working alongside adults, learning to track game or weave sinew into cord. Childhood wasn't a luxury. It was a crash course in staying alive. Imagine a little girl shivering in a hide cloak, her fingers raw from scraping bark, watching her mother with fierce determination. Boys practiced throwing spears, their small hands guided by elders who knew one bad lesson could mean a failed hunt later. Playtime. Maybe a quick game of tossing rocks, but even that was practice for something deadlier. And here's a chuckle for you. Picture a Neanderthal kid bragging, "My spear throws better than yours," only to trip over a root and faceplant in the dirt. Kids, right? Even 100,000 years ago, they were probably showing off. The women carried a heavy load, and not just in terms of work. Pregnancy was a gamble, with childbirth often a death sentence. Without midwives or medicine complications, claimed mothers and babies alike. Estimates suggest half of Neanderthal kids didn't make it to 5, their tiny bones littering archaeological sites like silent tragedies. Mothers who survived faced relentless cycles of pregnancy nursing and foraging, their bodies worn down by the grind. Yet they were the backbone of the group, keeping everyone fed, clothed, warm. If a woman died, the whole band felt it. Infants starved, morale cracked. Men weren't off the hook either. They led hunts, faced predators, and bore the scars to prove it. Leadership wasn't a title. It was earned through blood and survival. There's some academic bickering about Neanderthal social dynamics. Some scholars say they were egalitarian, sharing everything like a big dysfunctional family. Others argue there was a pecking order, with the strongest hunters calling the shots. The truth? Probably a mix. Skeletons show leaders took the worst beatings. Fractured ribs, crushed hands, suggesting they put themselves on the line for the group. But competition was real. Disputes over food mates or who got the warmest spot by the fire could turn deadly. Archaeological sites show signs of interpersonal violence. Skulls, bashed bones broken in fights. Survival didn't leave room for grudges, but it didn't mean they all held hands and sang Kumbaya either. Let's lighten the mood with another laugh. Imagine a Neanderthal family meeting. Everyone's grumpy, cold, and hungry, arguing over who botched the last hunt. One guy's like, "I told you to aim for the legs," while another's just sharpening his spear, ignoring the drama. Sounds like Thanksgiving at my place, minus the turkey. But seriously, these tensions were balanced by necessity. You fought, you made up, you moved on, because alone you were dead. Their communication wasn't Shakespeare, but it got the job done. Their hyoid bones suggest they could speak maybe in grunts and simple words enough to coordinate a hunt or warn of danger. Gestures probably filled in the gaps, pointing, waving, maybe the occasional exasperated eye roll. When resources ran low, the group faced brutal choices. Picture a winter so harsh the last scraps of meat are gone, and the kids are crying from hunger. Do you feed the strong hunter who can get more food, or the elder who's taught you everything? Some sites hint at triage bones of the weak, left behind unburied when survival demanded it, but even then they mourned. Graves show care, effort, love. At Shanidar, one burial had pollen from wildflowers, maybe placed there deliberately, a final gift to the dead. That's not just survival. That's humanity shining through the dark. Their social bonds were their strength and their vulnerability. Caring for the weak cost calories, time, energy, resources they barely had. Yet they did it again and again. Why? Maybe because they knew no one survives alone. Maybe because love, even in a world of ice and predators, was worth the cost. As the fire burned low, the group would draw closer, their shadows merging on the cave walls. A fragile circle of warmth against the endless cold. They weren't just fighting for themselves. They were fighting for each other, for the chance to see another dawn. And as we slip deeper into their world, let's hold on to that image. a family battered but unbroken facing the ice age together. The fire's glow is a faint defense against the darkness creeping into the cave, where the air hangs heavy with the damp chill of an ice age winter. Outside, the world is a frozen wasteland, but inside a new kind of enemy lurks one you can't see, can't fight, can't outrun. Disease was the silent killer that stalked Neanderthal bands, slipping through their tight-knit groups like a thief in the night. Imagine the scene: a cough starts in the corner, barely noticeable at first, maybe just the smoke from the fire catching in someone's throat. But soon it spreads, a wet, rattling sound, and before long, half the group is shivering with fever, their bodies betraying them in a world with no medicine, no understanding of what's tearing them apart. Tonight we're diving into the invisible horrors that plagued Neanderthals, diseases, parasites, and the relentless toll of a life without healing. This was a battle fought not with spears, but with sheer will, and the odds were never in their favor. Picture a family of 15 huddled in a cave so cramped their shoulders brush against each other. The air's thick with the smell of sweat smoke and the faint rot of unwashed hides. They're sharing warmth, yes, but also something far deadlier: pathogens. Respiratory infections were a nightmare in these close quarters. What we'd call a cold could spiral into pneumonia, and without antibiotics, even the strongest hunter could be coughing up blood within days. Archaeological evidence backs this up. Skeletons from sites like Shanidar Cave show rib damage and spine deformities, signs of chronic lung infections that would have left them gasping for air. Tuberculosis, that slow wasting disease, was likely a familiar foe, eating away at their lungs over months or years. Imagine trying to keep up with a mammoth hunt when every breath feels like a knife in your chest. That was their reality. Parasites were another constant torment, a hidden army sapping their strength. Roundworms, tapeworms, pinworms. These weren't just gross, they were deadly. Coprolites, fossilized feces from sites like El Salt in Spain, are crawling with parasite eggs, proof that Neanderthals carried massive worm loads. These critters stole nutrients, leaving even well-fed hunters malnourished, their bodies aching with fatigue. Kids were hit hardest. Many probably died from severe infestations, their small bodies unable to cope. Picture a child, pale and listless, clutching their stomach as worms drained their life away. Adults weren't spared either. Chronic diarrhea and anemia were par for the course. Here's a bit of ancient wisdom. In a world without clean water, every sip was a gamble. They drank from streams where animals bathed, unaware of the microscopic dangers lurking within. Here's a quirky fact to make you squirm. Neanderthals might have been their own worst enemies when it came to parasites. Handling raw meat from their kills, think bloody mammoth carcasses, exposed them to all sorts of nasty bugs. They didn't know to wash their hands, and their caves weren't exactly equipped with soap. One wrong cut, and you're not just eating dinner, you're inviting a tapeworm to move in. It's like they were running a prehistoric petting zoo for parasites. And here's a chuckle: imagine a Neanderthal trying to explain a stomachache to his buddy. Ugh, my gut's mad again. Yeah, probably that dodgy elk we ate. No Pepto-Bismol in sight, just a grimace and a hope it passes. Injuries were a breeding ground for infection, and Neanderthals had plenty of those. Their skeletons are a catalog of trauma-broken bones, gashed skulls, joints twisted from years of hard living. A simple cut from a stone tool or an animal claw could fester, turning septic in days. Without antiseptics, a nick could mean gangrene, and gangrene meant death. Dental problems were another killer. Their teeth, worn down from chewing tough meat or using them as tools, often developed abscesses. Imagine the agony of an infected tooth swelling your face with no dentist to pull it. Some skeletons show infections that spread to the jaw, or even the brain, a slow, excruciating end. One poor soul from La Chapelle aux Saints had such bad dental disease he probably couldn't eat without screaming. Yet his group kept him alive, pre-chewing his food. That's love in a world where pain was a constant companion. There's some debate among researchers about how Neanderthals dealt with disease. Some argue they had a basic grasp of medicinal plants, pointing to traces of yarrow and chamomile in their dental calculus herbs with anti-inflammatory properties. Others say it was dumb luck that they ate whatever plants they stumbled across. The truth: they probably noticed what worked like animals do and passed it down. Sites like El Cedrón in Spain show evidence of birch bark tar, a sticky antiseptic they used on wounds, or maybe even chewed to ease tooth pain. Producing that tar was no small feat. It required heating bark in a low-oxygen environment, a process so complex it's practically prehistoric rocket science. They weren't doctors, but they weren't clueless either. Childbirth was a particular horror. With no medical knowledge, complications were a death sentence. Neanderthal babies had big heads, and their mothers' robust pelvises didn't always make delivery easier. Estimates suggest up to half of infants died at birth, or soon after, along with many mothers. Imagine the grief of a group losing both a mother and her newborn, their numbers dwindling in a single night. The survivors had to move on, no time for mourning, when predators were circling. Women who made it through childbirth faced the grind of nursing, while foraging their bodies pushed to the limit. Yet they kept going because the group's future depended on it. Here's another laugh to lighten the mood picture. A Neanderthal doctor at work smearing mud on a wound and calling it a cure. Trust me, this swamp goo's the best. Meanwhile, the patient's just hoping it's not cursed mud. But in all seriousness, their attempts at healing were desperate and often futile. They might have packed wounds with leaves or chewed herbs to dull pain, but against serious infections, they were powerless. Zoonotic diseases picked up from the animals they hunted added another layer of danger. Anthrax from a mammoth carcass, tularemia from rabbits, or viruses from birds could wipe out a family before they knew what hit them. Food poisoning was a regular guest, especially in summer, when meat spoiled fast. They ate it anyway. What choice did they have? The psychological toll of this invisible war was crushing. Imagine watching your sister waste away from a fever, not knowing why, unable to help. Every cough, every cut, every ache carried the threat of death. Stress hormones must have been through the roof, weakening their immune systems further. Malnutrition didn't help. Lean winters left them vulnerable to every bug that came along. Scurvy, rickets, and other deficiency diseases were common, their bones showing signs of brittle weakness. Yet, amid this misery, they showed incredible resilience. Skeletons reveal individuals who survived infections and injuries that would have killed most thanks to their group's care. At Cima de los Huesos in Spain, a child with a severe skull deformity lived years longer than expected, carried and fed by a family that refused to give up on them. Let's chuckle one more time. Think of a Neanderthal waking up with a toothache, grumbling, "Why didn't I evolve with better teeth?" They didn't have dental plans, but they had each other. That care, that refusal to abandon the sick, was their strength. It's humbling, isn't it? We've got hospitals and pharmacies, but would we share our last meal with someone who couldn't repay us? They did, even when it meant going hungry themselves. As the fire burned low in that cave, the group would draw closer, tending to the sick, sharing what little they had, knowing tomorrow might bring another unseen enemy. Their fight against disease wasn't just about survival, It was about holding on to their humanity in a world that offered no mercy. The cave is quiet tonight, save for the soft crackle of the fire and the distant howl of wind slicing through the icy landscape. Shadows dance on the walls, flickering over rough stone that's seen countless winters. But look closer, those aren't just shadows. There, in the dim glow, you can make out faint red lines, handprints, and smudges of ochre like whispers from a time when survival wasn't enough, when Neanderthals reached for something more. Tonight we're stepping into their world of creativity, where art, ritual, and beauty bloomed in the heart of a brutal existence. These weren't just cave dwellers scraping by, they were artists, dreamers, and storytellers leaving marks of their humanity in a world that offered little room for anything but the fight to stay alive. Imagine a Neanderthal hunched over a fire, grinding red ochre into powder with a stone, the air thick with the earthy scent of pigment and smoke. They dip their fingers into the paste and press them to the cave wall, leaving a handprint that says, "I was here." This wasn't graffiti. It was a declaration, a moment of defiance against the relentless grind of Ice Age life. Archaeological sites across Europe, like El Castillo in Spain, reveal cave art dating back over 65,000 years, hand stencils, abstract dots, and lines that predate modern humans' arrival. Neanderthals were painting before we were folks, and that's a game changer. These weren't random scribbles. They required planning tools and a spark of imagination. Picture them mixing pigments, maybe arguing over which shade of red looked best. Too much ochre gronk, it's looking like bad blood. There's your first chuckle. Neanderthal art critiques probably not too different from ours. Their creativity didn't stop at paint. They crafted jewelry stringing eagle talon shells and feathers into necklaces and pendants. At sites like Krapina in Croatia, archaeologists found pierced beads and talons worn smooth from use. These weren't practical tools. They were personal, maybe even sacred. Imagine a young woman, her fingers calloused from scraping hides, slipping a shell necklace over her head, feeling a flicker of pride. Or a hunter wearing a talon pendant, believing it carried the spirit of the eagle. This was adornment, yes, but also identity proof. They saw themselves as more than just survivors. Here's a bit of ancient wisdom. Beauty isn't a luxury. It's a lifeline, a way to hold on to meaning when the world's trying to strip it away. Their burial practices tell an even deeper story. At Shanidar Cave in Iraq, archaeologists uncovered graves that hit you right in the feels. One body, dubbed Shanidar 4, was surrounded by pollen from wildflowers, hollyhock, grape, hyacinth, and others. Some debate whether this was intentional, but the careful placement of bodies, often curled in fetal positions, with tools or bones nearby, screams ritual. Picture a family hearts heavy with loss, laying their loved one to rest. They arrange stones around the body, maybe sprinkle flowers, their hands trembling not just from cold, but from grief. They didn't have words for afterlife, but they believed in something. Why else spend precious time and energy honoring the dead? That's not survival. That's love etched into the earth. Here's a quirky tidbit. Neanderthals might have been the first musicians. A bone flute from Divje in Slovenia, carved from a cave bear femur over 50,000 years ago, has holes spaced just right for a musical scale. Imagine a quiet night, the group gathered around the fire, one of them blowing soft notes into the bone, the sound echoing off the cave walls. Maybe it was a lullaby for a restless kid, or a way to calm nerves before a hunt. Either way, it's a reminder they weren't just grunting brutes. They had souls that craved expression. And here's another chuckle picture. A Neanderthal trying to teach his buddy the flute. No, you're blowing too hard. It sounds like a dying mammoth. Bet they had some laughs even in the dark. There's academic squabbling about how symbolic Neanderthals really were. Some scholars argue their art and burials show complex thought, maybe even proto religion. Others say it was practical ochre to preserve Hyde's burials to keep predators away. The evidence leans toward meaning. Their cave paintings weren't random. They chose specific walls, specific colors. Their jewelry wasn't just decoration. It was worn, cherished, passed down. Their burials took effort, time they could have spent hunting. These were people who thought beyond the next meal, who needed to create, to remember, to connect. If that's not symbolic, I don't know what is. Let's set another scene. It's twilight, the sky bruised purple over a frozen valley. A Neanderthal woman sits by the fire carving a small figurine from mammoth ivory. A crude shape, maybe a bear or a human. Her fingers ache from the cold, but she keeps going, lost in the act of creation. Around her, the group is quiet, watching, maybe humming softly. This wasn't about utility. It was about making something lasting. Something that said, we're more than this brutal world. Sites like Hohlefels in Germany have yielded similar figurines, tiny but intricate proof of an artistic impulse that refused to be crushed. They painted, they carved, they adorned themselves, not because it helped them survive, but because it helped them live. Their rituals extended to how they treated each other. Evidence suggests they revisited graves, adding offerings over time, bones, tools, maybe more flowers. At La Ferracie in France, a child's grave was so carefully prepared with stones arranged, just so it's clear the parents poured their hearts into it. Imagine the mother, her face streaked with tears, placing a tiny flint blade beside her child, hoping it would protect them in whatever came next. These acts weren't just about death, they were about connection, about refusing to let loss erase love. It's humbling, isn't it? We've got galleries and concerts, but would we spend our last scraps of energy painting a cave wall? They did. Here's one more laugh. Think of a Neanderthal art gallery opening. Everyone's gathered, squinting at a new hand stencil. One guy muttering, bold choice, but needs more ochre. They probably didn't have critics, but they had passion. That passion shows in their tools too, not just functional, but beautiful, with symmetrical points that took hours to craft. They didn't need to make them pretty, but they did, because even in a world of ice and predators, beauty mattered. Their creativity was a rebellion against the brutality of their lives. Every handprint, every necklace, every grave was a shout into the void. We're here, and we matter. They faced starvation, predators, and freezing nights, yet they found time to paint, to carve, to mourn. That's not just survival, that's humanity at its rawest. As the firelight fades, imagine them sitting together, their art glowing faintly on the walls, their voices soft with stories or songs. They were artists in a world that didn't care, dreamers in a nightmare, and their creations are a testament to a spirit that refused to break. As we move deeper into their story, let's hold on to that image, a cave alive with color and meaning, a fragile beacon of hope against the endless cold. The night is pitch black, the kind of dark that swallows light and hope alike, broken only by the faint glow of a fire struggling to stay alive in a Neanderthal camp. Outside the Ice Age world is a predator's playground, where every rustle in the underbrush could be death on four legs. Neanderthals didn't just battle hunger or cold, they faced beasts that make modern nightmares look tame. Cave lions, short-faced bears, and wolf packs roamed their world, each one a reminder that they weren't at the top of the food chain. Tonight, We're diving into the terrifying predators of the Pleistocene, the monsters Neanderthals had to outwit to survive, and the strategies they carved out of desperation and ingenuity. Picture yourself standing in their furs, spear in hand, heart pounding as yellow eyes glint in the darkness. This was their reality, a constant dance with creatures built to kill. Let's set the scene: a frost-crusted valley at dusk, the air heavy with the scent of pine and the sharp tang of fear. A Neanderthal band, maybe a dozen strong, moves cautiously along a ridge, their eyes scanning for tracks. They're not just hunting for food, they're trying not to become it. The cave lion, a beast that makes today's African lions look like house cats, was a top threat. These monsters stretched over 8 feet long, weighed up to 700 pounds, and had jaws that could crush bone like kindling. Fossils from sites like Swabian Jura in Germany show lion claw marks on cave walls, proof they weren't shy about strolling into Neanderthal homes. Imagine waking up to that, a half-ton cat, sniffing around your fire. Here's a bit of ancient wisdom in a world of predators. Vigilance was your only armor, one lazy glance, and your lunch. Then there were short-faced bears, the stuff of nightmares. Standing up to 12 feet tall, weighing over a ton, these brutes could outrun a horse and smash through bone with a single swipe. Their fossils found across Europe show teeth designed to rip flesh and claws like daggers. At sites like Arago Cave in France, bear bones mingle with Neanderthal tools, hinting at desperate standoffs. Picture a hunter spear raised, staring down a bear that could snap him in half. The group would have worked together, shouting, throwing rocks, maybe thrusting torches to scare it off. No single Neanderthal could take on a beast like that alone. It was all or nothing. Here's a chuckle to ease the tension. Imagine a Neanderthal yelling, "Back off, bear." I've got a pointy stick, brave, but probably not convincing. Wolves were another menace, hunting in packs that could outsmart even the sharpest Neanderthal band. These weren't your fairy tale wolves. Pleistocene wolves were bigger, meaner, with jaws that could crack a femur for the marrow. At sites like Krapina in Croatia, wolf bones show up alongside Neanderthal remains, suggesting they competed for the same kills. A pack could shadow a band for days, waiting for a weak straggler, a child, an elder, or an injured hunter. Neanderthals had to stay one step ahead, using fire and noise to keep the pack at bay. Picture them waving torches, shouting into the night, their voices raw with defiance. It wasn't just about strength. It was about outlasting the hunger in those glowing eyes. Hyenas, too, were a constant threat with bone-crushing jaws and a laugh that'd chill your blood. Spotted hyenas larger than their modern cousins roamed in clans that could overwhelm a small group. At sites like La Quina in France, hyena teeth marks scar Neanderthal bones, hinting at scavenging or worse. These weren't just competitors for food. They'd steal a fresh kill right from under you. Imagine the frustration. You've just speared a deer after days of tracking, only to hear that eerie cackle as a hyena pack moves in. Neanderthals fought back with spears and stones, but sometimes they had to cut their losses and run. Here's another laugh picture: a Neanderthal tossing a rock at a hyena and muttering, "Get your own dinner, you giggling thief." Their defense strategies were as clever as they were desperate. Fire was their greatest weapon, a flickering shield against the night. They'd build blazes at cave entrances, the smoke and heat warding off curious predators. At Abric Romani in Spain, archaeologists found layers of ash from fires kept burning for days, proof they weren't taking chances. They also used the landscape cliffs, narrow passes, even shallow rivers as natural barriers. A group might drive a predator toward a drop, or trap it in a choke point, thrusting spears in unison. Their tools were simple but deadly stone-tipped spears, heavy clubs, even sharpened bones. At Schoningen in Germany, wooden spears over 400,000 years old show they were built for power, designed to pierce thick hide. But no weapon guaranteed safety. One wrong move, and a lion's claws were in your chest. There's debate among scholars about how often Neanderthals clashed with predators. Some say they were apex hunters scaring off anything that dared challenge them. Others argue they were scavengers as much as hunters picking over kills left by bigger beasts. The truth likely lies in between. Sites like Saint-Vaast in France show Neanderthal bones with bite marks, proof they sometimes lost the fight. But others like Goyet Cave in Belgium have predator bones with cut marks showing they didn't always back down. They were scrappy, adaptable, and fiercely protective of their own. A mother might face a wolf pack to save her child knowing she'd likely die. That's not just courage, it's sacrifice. Injuries from these encounters were brutal. Skeletons show claw gashes, bite wounds, and shattered limbs. One Neanderthal from Saint-Césaire in France had a skull fracture from what looks like a predator attack, yet he survived long enough for the bone to heal. Imagine the pain, the fear, and the stubborn will to keep going. Their groups rallied around the wounded, sharing food and shelter even when it meant less for everyone. That loyalty was their edge, a spark of humanity that set them apart from the beast they faced. Here's one more chuckle. Think of a Neanderthal patching up a buddy after a lion scare, saying, "You owe me a new spear for this, pal." Humor, even in the face of death, probably kept them sane. Predators shaped their lives in ways we can barely grasp. Every hunt was a risk, every night a gamble. They learned to read tracks, to smell danger on the wind, to move like ghosts through the forest. Their world was alive with threats, but they didn't cower. They built fires, sharpened spears, and stood together, their silhouettes stark against the flames. It's humbling, isn't it? We've got locks and alarms, but would we face a cave lion with nothing but a stick and our wits? They did night after night because giving up wasn't an option. As the fire burns low, picture them keeping watch, their eyes scanning the dark, ready for whatever stepped into the light. Their story isn't just about survival. It's about defiance, about staring into the jaws of death and refusing to blink. The fire's embers glow faintly, casting a soft warmth over the Neanderthal band, huddled in their cave, the air thick with the scent of smoke and damp fur. Outside, the Ice Age night is merciless, but inside, something remarkable is happening. A man with a withered arm, barely able to hold a spear, chews on a strip of reindeer meat someone else hunted. An elder, her back bent from decades of survival, warms her hands by the fire, her presence a quiet anchor for the group. These weren't just survivors. They were caregivers, showing a compassion so profound it defies the brutal logic of their world. Tonight we're exploring the extraordinary care Neanderthals showed for their disabled and elderly, a testament to their humanity that shines through the frost and blood of their lives. Picture yourself among them, sharing your last scrap of food, knowing it might cost you, but doing it anyway, because that's what it means to be family. Imagine a scene. Dawn breaks over a frozen ridge, the group preparing for a hunt. One member, a young man with a leg twisted from a childhood injury, limps behind, unable to keep pace. In a world where every calorie counts, you'd expect him to be left behind, a burden too heavy for a starving band. But Neanderthals didn't work that way. Skeletons like Shanidar 1, found in Iraq, tell a story that hits hard. This guy was a mess, blind in one eye, arm crippled skull scarred from an old blow. He couldn't hunt, couldn't run yet. He lived into his 40s, a graybeard by Neanderthal standards. His group fed him, carried him, protected him through winters that would have killed a lone soul in days. That's not just kindness. It's a choice to value life over survival's cold math. This compassion wasn't a one-off. At La Chapelle-aux-Saints in France, a skeleton dubbed the Old Man had lost most of his teeth and suffered from arthritis so severe he could barely move. He survived because his group pre-chewed his food, shared their kills, and kept him warm. Picture the effort a hunter exhausted from chasing a deer, setting aside a portion for someone who couldn't repay the favor. A woman, her own kids crying for food, mashing meat for an elder who'd never hunt again. This wasn't instinct. It was sacrifice, a deliberate act that cost them precious resources. Here's a bit of ancient wisdom. Compassion isn't free. It's a debt you pay with your own strength, but it binds you tighter than any rope. Let's lighten the mood with a chuckle. Imagine a Neanderthal teenager tasked with hauling water for the group's cranky old grandma, rolling his eyes and muttering, "Why is she still bossing us around?" Sounds familiar, right? But that teenager would carry the water anyway, because leaving her behind wasn't an option. The group's survival hinged on unity, and every member, even the frail, had value. Elders weren't just baggage. They were libraries of knowledge, where to find flint, how to read the wind for a storm, which plants eased pain. A child born with a deformity like the one at Cima de los Huesos in Spain, with a malformed skull, was kept alive for years, likely because their presence mattered, even if they couldn't contribute physically. Caring for the disabled came with a brutal cost. Every extra mouth meant less food in a world where starvation was a constant shadow. A broken leg could take months to heal, and in that time the group might have to carry the injured through blizzards or share their meager rations. Skeletons show healed fractures like the woman from Saint-Césaire. With mended femur proof, they didn't abandon their wounded. Imagine the strain you're hungry cold and a wolf pack's howling nearby, yet you're hauling a friend who can't walk. That's not just physical strength. That's a stubborn refusal to let go of hope. Here's another laugh picture, a Neanderthal band arguing over who's stuck carrying their limping cousin. I did it last time. Yeah, but you ate the extra marrow family drama, Ice Age style. There's some academic debate about why Neanderthals bothered with this care. Some say it was purely practical, keeping elders alive, preserved knowledge like a living survival manual. Others argue it was emotional, rooted in bonds deeper than utility. The truth likely blends both. Sites like El Cedrón in Spain show a group where even children with injuries were tended to their bones marked by care, rather than neglect. This wasn't about repayment, it was about identity. They saw themselves in each other, broken or not. Abandoning the weak would have meant abandoning their own humanity, and they refused to cross that line. Let's paint another scene, a winter night so cold your breath freezes in the air. The groups gathered around a dying fire, passing around a scrap of hide with a few bites of fat. An elder, her hands trembling, takes a small piece, her eyes meeting the hunter who offered it. No words, just a nod, a shared understanding that they're in this together. That moment, that choice, is what kept them human. Sites like La Ferracie show graves of disabled individuals carefully arranged, sometimes with tools or stones, suggesting they weren't just tolerated, but valued. A child with a congenital deformity was buried with the same care as a strong hunter. That's not survival of the fittest. That's survival of the kindest. Here's a quirky fact. Neanderthals might have been the first to practice palliative care. Traces of medicinal plants like yarrow and chamomile in their teeth suggest they tried to ease pain, maybe chewing herbs to soothe an elder's aches or a child's fever. They didn't have pharmacies, but they had instinct and observation, noticing what worked and passing it down. It wasn't much, but in a world without aspirin, it was everything. And one more chuckle, imagine a Neanderthal nurse trying to convince a stubborn elder to chew some bitter leaves. Eat this, it's good for you. Tastes like dirt. Some things never change. This compassion had a flip side. Caring for the weak stretched their resources thin, sometimes to breaking. In lean times, they faced impossible choices: feed the injured or the children, move camp, or stay with the dying. Some sites show signs of triage, bones left unburied when survival demanded moving on. But even then, their care stands out. They didn't just survive, they carried their humanity through the cold, the hunger, the fear. It's a humbling contrast to our world, where we've got hospitals and safety nets, but still struggle to care for the vulnerable. Would we share our last meal with someone who couldn't repay us? They did, again and again. As the fire dims, picture the group drawing closer, their silhouettes blurring into one. The injured, the old, the young, they're all here, bound by a compassion that cost them everything, but gave them something greater: a sense of who they were. They weren't just fighting for survival, they were fighting for each other, for the idea that even in a world of ice and predators, no one gets left behind. That's the heart of their story, a legacy of care that echoes across millennia. As we move forward, let's hold on to that image: a band of Neanderthals, their fire, a fragile glow, refusing to let the cold snuff out their humanity. The fire's down to glowing coals, the cave barely holding back the chill of an ice age night that stretches endlessly beyond the entrance. The world outside is shifting, not just with the slow grind of glaciers, but with changes that will reshape the Neanderthals' fragile existence. The ground they've walked for millennia is turning against them: warming climates, shrinking forests, and a new rival stepping onto the scene: modern humans. Tonight, we're diving into the environmental upheaval and the arrival of Homo sapiens that pushed Neanderthals to the brink. Picture yourself in their world, watching the familiar tundra give way to strange new landscapes, feeling the ground shift beneath your feet as strangers with sharper tools and different ways encroach on your territory. This was a time of change that tested their resilience like never before. Let's set the scene. It's around 40,000 years ago, and Europe's climate is in flux. The Ice Age is loosening its grip with warming periods called interstadials, thawing the permafrost and reshaping the land. The vast tundra, once teeming with mammoths and reindeer, is giving way to denser forests and grasslands. For Neanderthals, this was a crisis. Their stocky bodies, built for cold, were less suited to warmer climates. Their hunting strategies, honed for open plains, where they could drive megafauna over cliffs, didn't work as well in thick woods where prey could vanish. Imagine a hunter, sweat beading on his brow, struggling to track a deer through tangled underbrush. The world they knew, the one their ancestors mastered, was slipping away. Here's a bit of ancient wisdom: adaptability is survival, but even the toughest can't outrun a world that's changing faster than they can. The evidence is stark. Sites like Gorham's Cave in Gibraltar show Neanderthals clinging to shrinking habitats, their tools and bones concentrated in areas where open landscapes persisted. Pollen records from lake beds across Europe reveal a shift from tundra-friendly plants to trees like oak and birch, signaling a warmer, wetter climate. This wasn't just inconvenient, it was deadly. Mammoths and woolly rhinos, their staple prey, were dying out as grasslands vanished. Smaller, faster animals like deer and boar took their place, demanding new hunting skills. Neanderthals were slow to master. Starvation loomed larger than ever, their fires burning low as food grew scarce. Here's a chuckle to lighten the mood. Picture a Neanderthal grumbling. Back in my day, we chased mammoths, not these sneaky rabbits. Change is tough, even 40,000 years ago. Then came the new players, modern humans, Homo sapiens, streaming into Europe from Africa and the Middle East around 45,000 years ago. These weren't the burly, cold-adapted Neanderthals. They were taller, leaner, with tools and strategies that gave them an edge. Their spear points were finer, their blades sharper, and they brought something new, projectile weapons like atlatls, which let them kill from a distance. Neanderthals used to close quarters hunting with thrusting spears were outclassed. Sites like Aurignac in France show early Homo sapiens tools, sleek, efficient, and deadly, appearing just as Neanderthal sites start to thin out. Imagine the tension a Neanderthal band spotting these newcomers across a valley, their strange chatter and unfamiliar weapons sparking fear and suspicion. It wasn't just competition, it was a clash of worlds. There's debate among scholars about how much direct conflict there was. Some argue Neanderthals and modern humans fought outright with violence over territory or resources. Others suggest they mostly avoided each other, competing indirectly for the same dwindling prey. Evidence from sites like Les Rois in France shows cut-marked Neanderthal bones alongside Homo sapiens tools, hinting at possible violence, or maybe just scavenging. But competition doesn't need bloodshed to be brutal. Modern humans were better at exploiting resources, using wider trade networks to share tools and knowledge. Their art, like the vivid paintings at Chauvet Cave, suggests a cultural edge, maybe better communication or social cohesion. Neanderthals with their small, tight-knit bands couldn't match that scale. Here's another laugh. Imagine a Neanderthal eyeing a Homo sapiens camp, muttering, "Who do they think they are with those fancy spear throwers show-offs?" The environmental shift hit Neanderthals hard, but it wasn't just about climate or competition. Their population was small. Estimates suggest maybe 50,000 across Europe at their peak. Small groups meant less genetic diversity, making them vulnerable to disease and inbreeding. Modern humans with larger, more connected populations could bounce back from losses better. Genetic studies show Neanderthals had low effective population sizes, with signs of inbreeding in skeletons from El Cedrón in Spain. Imagine a band of 15 already stretched thin, losing half their number to a harsh winter or a failed hunt. Recovery was near impossible. Meanwhile, Homo sapiens bands with more numbers and wider networks kept growing. Neanderthals didn't go down without a fight. They adapted where they could, shifting to smaller game and coastal resources like shellfish, as seen at Vanguard Cave in Gibraltar. They even picked up tricks from the newcomers. Some late Neanderthal sites show tools mimicking Homo sapiens designs like the Châtel-Perronian culture in France. But it was too little too late. The warming climate shrank their preferred habitats, and modern humans' sheer numbers overwhelmed them. Interbreeding happened. Modern Europeans carry 1–2% Neanderthal DNA, but it wasn't enough to save them. Picture a Neanderthal woman, maybe one of the last, raising a child with Homo sapiens. Features her world fading as a new one rises. Here's a quirky fact. Neanderthals and modern humans might have swapped more than genes. Sites like Grotte du Renne in France show beads and tools that could be Neanderthal-made but look suspiciously like Homo sapiens styles. Did they trade, share campfires, maybe even tell stories? It's a fleeting image of connection in a world pulling them apart. And one more chuckle picture a Neanderthal trying to barter with a Homo sapiens. I'll trade you this nice flint for that spear thrower thing. Nah, mate. I'll take your cave instead. Tough negotiators, those sapiens. The changing world wasn't just a backdrop, it was a force that reshaped everything. Neanderthals clung to their ways, their caves, their fires. But the ground was shifting too fast. Forests replaced tundra, new rivals outpaced them, and their small numbers dwindled. By 40,000 years ago, their presence was fading, their fires burning out in caves that would soon belong to others. It's humbling, isn't it? They survived predators, starvation, and ice for 300,000 years, but change, relentless, unyielding change, proved too much. As we move toward their final chapter, hold on to this image. A small band of Neanderthals, their silhouettes stark against a warming sky, watching strangers move into their world, their spears still sharp but their time running out. The fire's nearly gone, just a faint pulse of embers in the cave, casting long shadows that seem to flicker with ghosts. The air's heavy, not just with cold, but with the weight of an ending. Outside, the world is no longer the Neanderthals. The tundra is shrinking, the megafauna are vanishing, and the chatter of modern humans echoes across valleys that once knew only their grunts. This is the twilight of the Neanderthals, a time when their fires burned low, and their numbers dwindled to a whisper. Tonight we're walking through their final days, tracing the last strongholds, where they clung to life and uncovering the faint but enduring legacy they left in our blood and bones. Picture yourself as one of the last, your spear heavy in your hand, knowing the world you fought for is slipping away. Let's set the scene. It's around 40,000 to 28,000 years ago, and Neanderthals are fading fast. Europe, once their sprawling domain, is now a patchwork of shrinking refuges, rocky outcrops, coastal caves, and remote valleys where the old ways still hold. Sites like Gorham's Cave in Gibraltar and Zafaraya in Spain are some of the last Neanderthal holdouts, their floors littered with tools and bones from a people refusing to let go. The climate's warming, turning their beloved tundra into forests they struggle to navigate. Mammoths and woolly rhinos, their lifeblood, are nearly gone, replaced by fleet-footed deer and boar that demand skills they're still learning. Imagine a hunter, his breath ragged, chasing a deer through thick woods, his spear too heavy for the task, his stomach empty for days. Here's a bit of ancient wisdom. Survival isn't just about fighting. It's about knowing when the fight is no longer yours. Their decline wasn't sudden like a meteor strike, but a slow bleed. Small populations already stretched thin couldn't recover from losses. A failed hunt, a harsh winter, a child lost to fever, each hit harder when your band numbers only a dozen. Genetic studies from sites like El Cedrón show signs of inbreeding, their gene pool shrinking as groups grew isolated. Disease, too, took its toll, with modern humans bringing new pathogens Neanderthals had no defenses against. Picture a family coughing in the dark, their fire too weak to warm them, unaware that a virus from a rival camp is stealing their strength. Starvation was the final blow, fewer animals, less territory, and competition from Homo sapiens who hunted smarter, networked better, and bred faster. Sites like Spy Cave in Belgium show Neanderthal bones alongside those of modern humans, a stark reminder of who was winning the race. Their last strongholds were places of defiance. Gorham's Cave, perched on the edge of the Mediterranean, tells a story of resilience. Here Neanderthals fished, gathered shellfish, and even hunted dolphins, new tricks for an old people. They carved tools from bone and stone, their hearths still warm with the memory of fires. But even here, the signs are clear. Their tools grow scarce, their bones fewer. By 28,000 years ago, the caves fall silent, the last embers cold. Imagine a woman, one of the last napping a flint blade, with hands worn by years of work, her eyes scanning a horizon now filled with strangers. Her band is small, maybe 5 or 6, and the laughter of children is a fading memory. Here's a chuckle to ease the ache. Picture her muttering, "These new guys with their fancy spears think they're so smart. Bet they can't skin a seal like me." Pride, even at the end. There's debate among scholars about what sealed their fate. Some point to climate change, which reshaped their world too fast. Others blame competition, with Homo sapiens out hunting and outbreeding them. A few argue for violent skulls with suspicious fractures, hint at clashes, though evidence is thin. Most likely it was all of these, a perfect storm of pressures they couldn't outrun. Genetic studies show interbreeding with Neanderthal DNA in modern humans peaking around this time. Sites like Riparo Mezzena in Italy suggest mixed children, their features blending both species. Imagine a Neanderthal man, his broad face softening as he looks at his half-human child, knowing his kind is fading, but his blood will linger. We carry 1–2% of their DNA today, a quiet echo of those final encounters. Their extinction wasn't total erasure. They left tools, art, and burials that whisper of their lives. Caves like Bruniquel in France, with mysterious stone circles built deep underground, show a complexity we're still unraveling. Their genes shape us too. Bits of Neanderthal DNA influence our immune system's skin, even our response to disease. In a way, they're still here, woven into our story. Here's a quirky fact. Some of us owe our ability to handle cold weather to Neanderthal genes. Next time you shrug off a chilly day, thank a Neanderthal ancestor. And one more laugh, imagine a modern human bragging about their new spear thrower, only for a Neanderthal to scoff, "Call me," when it kills a mammoth kid. Their final fires burned out in places like Gibraltar, where the sea met the cliffs and the world felt vast but empty. Picture the last band, their numbers too few to sustain a hunt, their stories told to no one. They didn't know they were the last, didn't know their caves would one day be museums. They just kept going as they always had, until the cold, the hunger, or the newcomers claimed them. It's a heavy thought, isn't it? They survived 300,000 years of predators, ice, and starvation, only to fade as the world changed around them. Their end wasn't a bang, but a whisper, a fire going out in the dark. As we near the end of their story, hold on to this image. A lone Neanderthal standing on a cliff, the wind carrying the scent of salt and change. His spear rests at his side, his eyes fixed on a horizon he no longer owns. Behind him, the cave is empty, the fire cold, but his blood flows on in us, a legacy of resilience that refuses to be forgotten. Their story isn't just about extinction, it's about endurance, about a people who faced the impossible and left a mark that time can't erase. The cave is silent now, the last embers long since faded to ash, leaving only the cold stone and the ghosts of fires that once warmed Neanderthal hands. The world outside has moved on. Forests have replaced tundra. Modern humans have claimed the valleys and the megafauna that once roamed, our bones in the earth. The Neanderthals are gone, but their story isn't. It lingers in the tools they crafted, the art they painted, and the DNA they passed to us. Tonight, we're closing their tale by reflecting on their resilience, their contributions to our humanity, and the lessons they whisper across millennia. Picture yourself standing in their empty cave, feeling the weight of their absence, but also the strength they left behind. This is the story of a people who faced a brutal world, and refuse to break, whose echoes still shape us today. Let's set the final scene. It's 28,000 years ago in a cliffside cave overlooking a restless sea. The last Neanderthal band, maybe just a handful now, huddles around a fire too small to chase away the chill. Their tools are worn, their bodies scarred, their eyes heavy with the knowledge that the hunts are leaner, the winters harder. They don't know they're the last of their kind, but they feel the world slipping away. Yet even in these final moments, they sharpen their spears, share their scraps, and paint a handprint on the wall, a final act of defiance against oblivion. Here's a bit of ancient wisdom. Resilience isn't just surviving, it's leaving a mark, no matter how small, that says you were here. Their endurance was staggering. For over 300,000 years, Neanderthals faced a world that threw everything at them: freezing winters, ravenous predators, starvation, disease. They didn't just survive, they thrived, carving out a life in caves and on plains, where every day was a battle. Their tools, from the razor-sharp levallois points to the fire-hardened spears of Schoningen, show a people who mastered their craft. Their art, hand stencils in El Castillo, bone flutes in Divjebab, reveals a spark of creativity that burned even in the darkest times. Their burials, like the flower-strewn graves of Shanidar, speak of love and loss that cut as deep as any spear. They weren't the brutes we once imagined. They were us in a rawer form, fighting for meaning in a world that offered none. Their contributions to our humanity run deeper than we once thought. Genetic studies show Neanderthal DNA in modern humans, especially in Europeans and Asians, shaping our immune systems, skin pigmentation, even our ability to metabolize fats. That cold weather tolerance you feel on a brisk morning, thank a Neanderthal. Their interbreeding with Homo sapiens, seen in sites like Riparo Medzena, wasn't just a footnote, it's a thread in our story. They gave us more than genes. They gave us resilience, the blueprint for surviving against the odds. Here's a quirky fact: some of your allergies might come from Neanderthal DNA, a little gift from our ancient cousins. Next time you sneeze, give them a nod. Their lessons for us are profound. They faced a changing world, warming climates, vanishing prey, new rivals, and fought to adapt even when it wasn't enough. Their small bands, bound by loyalty, remind us that survival is collective, that no one makes it alone. Their care for the weak, seen in the crippled Shanidar I and the toothless old man of La Chapelle, challenges us to ask, would we share our last meal in a starving world? Their art and rituals, etched in ochre and bone, tell us that even in hardship we create, we mourn, we hope. Here's a chuckle to lighten the weight. Imagine a Neanderthal looking at our world, shaking his head at our endless scrolling, saying, "You've got fire in your pocket, and you're still complaining." Perspective, right? There's debate among scholars about what Neanderthals mean to us today. Some see them as a cautionary tale, a species undone by change they couldn't outpace. Others view them as pioneers, their genes and innovations paving the way for our success. The truth is, they're both a reminder that even the strongest can fall, but also that every struggle leaves a legacy. Their caves, from Brunikel's stone circles to Gorham's last hearths, are time capsules of grit and grace. They didn't know their story would outlive them, but they told it anyway, in every spear point, every handprint, every grave. Let's linger on one final image: a Neanderthal alone on a cliff at dusk, the sea crashing below. His fire is gone, his band lost to time, but his eyes still burn with the stubborn will that carried his people through millennia. He doesn't know that thousands of years later, We'll find his bones, his tools, his art, and marvel at his life. He doesn't know his blood flows in us, a quiet gift across the ages. He just stands there, spear in hand, facing a world that's moving on without him. Their story isn't just about extinction, it's about endurance, about a people who stared down the impossible and left a mark that time can't erase. So, as we close this journey, let's carry their lessons forward. In our own struggles, whether it's a changing climate, a divided world, or personal battles, remember the Neanderthals. They fought, they loved, they created, and they endured, not for glory, but because it's what humans do. Their fires are out, but their light lingers in our genes, our stories, our will to keep going. Next time you face a hard day, think of them and maybe just maybe you'll find the strength to paint your own handprint on the wall of time.